Hello and welcome to the big fight. 25 years ago was one of the darkest days that India has ever seen. In the morning, 25 years ago, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the Prime Minister of India, was killed. And by this time, 25 years ago, we were already starting to see unfolding in the national capital an incident that would probably be one of the biggest blots that we've ever seen in this nation, where gangs of people were walking around killing fellow Indians just because they belonged to a particular religion. Why are we going into history 25 years later? Essentially, today, it is to ask ourselves a question. Can it still happen again? Can it ever happen again? And if it can, what can we do to stop it? But before I introduce the panelists and start going into some of those questions, let's just pause for a minute to remember what actually happened in those riots 25 years ago. So we're looking back at history to ask ourselves this question, could it ever happen again? And it has happened, of course, after 1984. It happened in Mumbai, it happened in Gujarat, and every time we as a nation ask ourselves that question, how can we stop it from ever happening again? Let's see if we can try and find some of perhaps the answers today. Let me just welcome our panelists who are with us today. Harinder Baveja, Editor, Investigation, Tehelka, old friend of all of us. Great to have you with us right here. Chandan Mitra, senior leader of the BJP, but also one of the top journalists in this country for a long, long time. So it's great to have you with us. Manish Tiwari, for whom the events of that particular era, you're of course spokesperson of the Congress Party, but for whom the events of that particular decade, of course, also have a personal element of tragedy, Manish, for you, and we do know that, we do recognize that. Zafar Sareshwala, an industrialist who was one of the victims of the Gujarat riots and therefore knows what it is to go through incidents of trauma like that. Nalini Singh, whom of course we've known for all that period. You used to be broadcasting at that time, and very little would happen in TV. And one of the questions, Nalini, that we would like to ask you today is that had you had 24-hour news channels in that era, would it have made a difference or would it not have made a difference? And then we are also being joined on this program by a number of people for whom the tragedy of 1984 was, of course, deeply, deeply personal. And we're going to welcome onto the panel Nirpreet Kaur, who was one of the victims of those riots in 1984. And here in the audience, we have lots of very special guests joining us. We have Babu Singh, for example, who's the president of the 1984 Victims Justice and Welfare Society. We have Karnail Singh, Peer Mohammed, who's also a victim of the riots. So we'll be hearing your voices also as we go on. Harinder, why don't I kick off with you, actually? Can it happen again?
Well, as you said, we've seen what happened in Gujarat, Vikram. So obviously, if the state is responsible in manufacturing a riot, then yes, it's going to happen again and again and again. And I think what's important is that this culture of impunity that so surrounds our politicians and the policemen, until that stops, it's going to continue to happen. And 2002 testifies to this fact, because 84 was heinous enough. If the state was serious in not repeating massacre of communities, Gujarat would not have repeated itself.
Tuba.com,